moving right along. Developing a healthy personality. This is one of the most important things we do in life because a healthy personality is the foundation of happiness. And the ultimate aim of all of human life is to be happy. In fact, what I learned from Ayn Rand when I began reading her was several things, but one of the things she said is that you can measure the quality of your entire life by how happy you are most of the time. If you can achieve your own happiness, as I said before, then you're a very successful person, even if you live in a small house or a small shack. But if you can accomplish everything but you're not happy, then to that degree you really have not lived a successful life. So how do we develop a healthy personality? 85% of our happiness in life comes from happy relationships with other people. 85% of our happiness comes with hair on top, in most cases. There are some exceptions here, but the other 15% comes from achievement of some kind. And so the achievement is kind of like the icing on the cake. The achievement is really helpful, but you'll never get any lasting joy from achievement. There are people who are billionaires who are miserable, who worked their way up from farm boys, and they're billionaires today, and they're still unhappy. They've got massive homes and cars and yachts and boats and everything else, and they're miserable, and they're snappy, and they're irritable, and they've got physical ailments, and they have doctors that travel with them to administer to them, and so on. And there are people who, have done far less than that, are just happy all the time, and that's your goal. And remember, someone said, what was that wonderful line? He said, you better be very clear about what you're aiming at, because that's probably what you're going to hit. And if you're aiming at happiness, then make sure that happiness is the organizing principle. And of course, the core of happiness is peace of mind. Core of happiness is peace of mind. So we say the measures of a healthy personality are, number one, is how much you like yourself. Really, that's the core, your level of self-esteem, how much you genuinely like and respect yourself and consider yourself to be a good person. And the wonderful thing is, as we said at the beginning, you are a thoroughly good person. And what you do is just make sure that everything you do on the outside is consistent with that truth, is that you're a thoroughly good person. There was a little book that was written in the turn of the last century, and it was called What Would Jesus Do? And it was a little book written by a minister. It became a national bestseller many years ago. But it was about a town, just a normal town, normal citizens with all their problems and complaints and difficulties. And the preacher gave a speech, and he said, let us all live in this town, and before we do or say anything, just ask, what would Jesus do in this situation? And so the story, it was a fictional story, talked about how everybody in this town began to use that as their basic principle in business, in relationships, in law, in work, in behaving, interacting with other people. They would always ask that question, and the town became an absolutely happy place where people were full of joy and treated each other with warmth and compassion and helped each other and so on. Just a really nice concept. In other words, they said, if the highest aspiration is to be a totally beautiful person, then use that as your guiding principle. How would a really fully fulfilled person behave in every situation? But it's a real tough standard, by the way. Oh, geez. I don't do that, Okay, number two is how much responsibility do you accept? How much responsibility you accept. And remember, there's a spectrum from accepting total responsibility, which means total power, total confidence, and irresponsibility, not accepting any responsibility at all, which is total anger, total frustration, and total failure in life. You cannot imagine a leader who does not accept responsibility. And you cannot imagine an irresponsible person ever becoming a leader. And so the key words are, I am responsible. No matter what happens, I'm responsible. When I was a child, my parents were responsible. Now I'm a grown-up, I'm responsible. The third is how easily you forgive. And this is a real toughie, but it's really the essence of spiritual development. I say it's the key to the spiritual kingdom is to develop the ability to freely forgive so that there's nobody in your life that you have any anger toward. You have no negative emotion toward anybody. You forgive them all. Let them go. Forgive them all. God bless them. Let them go. God bless them, let them go. I used to be angry with my parents, and then I realized that my parents were the product of their parents who were the product of their parents, going back generations, and that what my father was especially was nothing, he could be none other. And it's just like a tree. You don't get mad at a tree, you don't get mad at a stick, you don't get mad at a person who could be no other than who they are. That's why it's important to understand that no matter how your parents treated you, it had nothing to do with you. It had to do with them. It was their problems, and you just happened to be a drive-by shooting victim. You just happen to get the brunt of their own problems, which they brought with them from generations back, and you could never have changed it. You could not have gotten your parents to deal with you differently than they did. They could not have given you any more love than they gave you or any more attention, because that's just the way they were. So just let it go. I was out with a girl many years ago, and I was complaining about my father. Bitch, 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 you know, my father is my father. She said, Brian, she said, are you happy to be alive? And I said, yes. Well, yes, of course. Yes, I'm really happy with my life. He said, well, he got you here, so shut up. I wanted some sympathy. I wanted some, pat my brow sort of stuff. And she was no nonsense. She said, just shut up. If you're happy to be alive, then shut up. Your parents got you here. You know something? I never complained about my father or my parents ever again for the rest of my life, from that day to this. I said, well, at least they got me here. They gave me a kick at the cat. They gave me a chance at life. So no more complaints. For Scott Peck, not Scott Peck, but there's a philosopher. The young man comes to the philosopher and he says, life is hard. And the philosopher said, as compared with what? And always thinking about, life is hard? As compared with what? Your current situation is hard? As compared with what? Being dead? Think about that. If you know the old saying, I cried because I had no shoes and then I met a man who had no feet. If you think of the fact that you're probably better off than 95% of the world's population in history, then you think that your problems are very small and theirs are very big. There's a little one-liner I read. I was sitting in a waiting room and there's a quote book, and I read the quote and I never forgot it. I put the book down and never saw it again. It said, if all the people in the world could bring all of their cares and put them into a great big pile where they could see them in comparison with everybody else's cares, he said each person would slink ashamedly forward and take their little care of the pile and slink away quietly into the night. Something like that. I thought, isn't that interesting? If you could compare your problems with the problems that other people really have, you take your little petty problems and you just slink away ashamed into the night. And it's a good way to realize it. No matter what problems you have, other people have got it 100 times worse. Number 4, positive expectations is a mark of a healthy personality. That means that you just have an attitude of confident expectancy. You just positively expect good things to happen. And wonderfully enough, your expectations do become your realities. They become your self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you expect good things to happen, good things are going to happen to you. If you expect to have a happy life and have a wonderful relationship and get a good table in the restaurant and make a lot of money, those things will happen to you. That expectancy is almost like a wave of energy that affects everybody around you. And number 5 is how well you get along with others, which is the focal point of this session. How well you get along with others is the measure of how healthy your personality really is. So we say that the law of indirect effort says that in our relationships with others, we seem to get what we want faster, more indirectly than directly. In other words, instead of getting people to like us, we instead like other people. So this law of indirect effort is a powerful, powerful method for getting along wonderfully with other people. I wrote a book a couple of years ago with Ron Arden called The Power of Charm. It's the only book ever written on charm. It's a worldwide top seller. And what it shows you in 35 lessons, 35 just short lessons, how to be charming. And it's quite amazing. And I had a chapter called Charming Him, Charming Her, Charming Others. And charming her, I kind of expanded on ways of charming her. And my editors were all women, came back and said, this sounds very much like a seduction guide. I said, oh, no, it's just being friends. It's just being friends with members of the opposite sex. It sounds like you've got something more nefarious that you're thinking about here. And so they may maybe cut out all the good parts from charming her, because I don't know where they got that terrible idea. Anyway, so they're just really ideas on charming, and they are ways to be perceived as charming by the way you treat other people. And it's the most amazing darn thing. It's just by treating other people in a special way, they find you to be charming. And one of the very best ways is to ask people really good questions about themselves and listen closely to the answers and be fascinated by the answers. So we say this, we say to impress others, be impressed by them. So if you ask a person, what sort of work do you do? And they say, I do this. You say, wow, that's an interesting field. How long have you been in that field? Geez, how did you get into that? Boy, that's amazing. I've been reading about that field for years. That takes an awful lot of hard work to be successful. I mean, just be impressed by a person's work or their occupation. I'm always sensitive. John, John, are you here? Is John Asseroff here? Yeah. John is here now, but we're just talking at the break about how I'm not really big into self-disclosure. And so I don't like it when people come up to me and ask me personal questions about my inner thoughts and inner feelings, because I don't really feel that it's really of any concern to them. I have more harsh ways of putting it. It's none of their blankety blank business. But I don't feel comfortable with that. So in being charming, you don't ask people intimate questions because you don't know them. You have no right to, but you could ask them what they do and how they like it and how's everything going and how do they get into that field and what are the big challenges in that field today and where do they see the field going in 3 to 5 years. People love to talk about what they do during the day, and the more you listen intensely to people, the more they find you to be charming. They say, geez, that's an interesting person. So, and whenever somebody tells you something about themselves, be impressed by it. Because the more you are impressed by something that the other person does or says, the more they'll be impressed with you without even asking. To be interesting to others, be interested in them. Be interested in them. Many people think that the way to get people to like me is to go out there and try to impress them and try to get them interested. No, be interested in them, and by the law of indirect effort, which is not a theory or a principle of indirect effort, it's a law. And when you indirectly are influenced or impressed or interested in other people, they will automatically find you to be an interesting person. To have a friend, be a friend. To have a friend, be a friend. You can make all the friends you want by going out and finding ways to be friends to other people. How do you become a friend to other people? Find ways to help them. Is there any way I can help you? I will never forget, I was in a meeting with my boss, who was worth $800 million, and these people circulate at the same level, and a gentleman from Eastern Canada, his name was McCain, just not like our presidential contender. His name was McCain. He was in charge of McCain Foods, which is one of the biggest companies in Canada. It's a billion-dollar company, and I read stories about it in the business press. He built it up from a small mom-and-pop shack and small food distributor, and now it's a massive company. And so here's this guy, he's a billionaire, with my boss, who's an 800 millionaire, and they're talking. And my boss invited me in, and he had a personal assistant, Mr. McCain did, and I was Dr. Allard's personal assistant. So we sat there listening to the two talk, like two giants talking. And they were just very friendly, and they're very courteous, and very respectful, and talking back and forth, and kind of, as business people are always looking for ways to how we could do business together and so on. And occasionally Dr. Allard would ask me a question or ask the assistant a question to keep us in the conversation. And Mr. McCain would ask me a question and ask his assistant. And I remember at the end of this conversation, which took an hour, and you really realize you're in the presence of real heavyweights. And he turned to me and he said, Brian, he says, is there anything I can do for you? Is there any way I can help you in any way? I still remember that. He's one of the most powerful men in the country, one of the richest. And he genuinely meant it. I said, I cannot think of anything, but thank you very much for offering. I just really appreciate it. And I still, as you can see, I still remember to this day, though it was more than 30 years ago, here's a great man whose whole focus is, how can I help you in some way? And you'll find that's one of the wonderful ways to get along with other people is to ask them, is there any way I can help you in what you're doing? And what will happen because of the law of reciprocity, what goes around comes around, that person will be open to helping you at a later time if you offer to help them. So the rule is always help others first. Do unto others, but do it first. If you're going to want somebody to do something nice for you, find a way to do it to them first. So the law of sowing and reaping is another powerful principle in healthy personality. The quality of your relationships at any given moment is the result of what you have sown in those relationships. And remember, we'll talk about this in a minute, but I cannot emphasize it. The way that you grow the value of a relationship is by investing more time in that relationship. There's no other way to do it than by putting more of your own self into the relationship. We say the key to a great relationship is how much time you spend head to head, knee to knee, face to face, heart to heart. That's the key. So the quality of your relationships will largely be determined by the amount of time that you've invested in those relationships in the past. At any given time, by the way, you can dramatically enhance the quality of your relationship by just investing more time in that relationship. Here's a graph of human personality. And what it says, the triangle shows you at the bottom of the triangle is the people with low self-esteem. At the top of the triangle is people with high self-esteem. And what it says basically, if this is all the human personalities, almost anybody can get along with a few people. Almost anybody, even prisoners in maximum security institutes have a couple of friends they get along with, other people who are in maximum security institutes. Even the worst criminals, the worst drunks, the worst bums, the worst people, they all have a couple of people that they're friends with, all right? But the question is, how many people can you get along with in terms of the differences of personalities? So here you have personalities from low self-esteem to high self-esteem, and personalities from inner-directed or self-contained people, quiet, shy, people who don't talk a lot, to extroverts, people who are outgoing. That's the entire range of human personality. And the higher your level of self-esteem, the more different people you can get along with well and comfortably. And the higher your self-esteem, the more you like yourself, the more you get along with more people. There will always be people that you may not get along with, but usually that is not your problem, it's theirs. There are some things, there are some people with whom you can never relate with satisfactorily, but the more you like yourself, the more people you get along with of more different personalities, more different temperaments. So we say if you want to develop a truly healthy personality, use the law of reversibility. The law of reversibility, act as if you were already a positive, friendly person. Act as if you were already the most popular, friendliest person around, and treat people that way. Go up to them, meet them, say, "Hi, how are you?" Now, I want to give you a little discovery, is that the way that you give your name is a very instant indication of the height of your personality, the height of your self-esteem. Is people with high self-esteem give their name clearly, and they give it with a firm handshake, and they look the person right in the eye because they like themselves and they're proud of who they are. People with low self-esteem mumble their name and have a wimpy, shaky handshake, and they look away. It's the most amazing darn thing. But because of the law of reversibility, you can reverse it. So if you were simply to introduce yourself and give your name clearly to a person and smile and shake hands with them firmly and look them in the eye, that causes your self-esteem like a thermometer on a hot day, it causes your self-esteem to go up. And if every time you meet somebody, you give your name clearly and you take the initiative, introduce yourself to them. And so, "Hello, I'm Brian Tracy. How are you? What's your name?" And ask them for their name. And when they give you their name, if they give it to you clearly, fine. Repeat the name. "Ah, Harry Wilson. That's a great name. Is that an English name or is that an American name?" Always ask a person the roots of their name. It's because people are always very proud and very interested and very knowledgeable about the roots of their name. And what is the most important sound in the human language? Your own name. So what I want you to do is I want everybody to stand up, just for fun. Just stand up, please. And then I want you to turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself. First one, then the other. And you say, "Hello, I'm who I am," and shake hands clearly. And shake. Thank you. Thank you. All right. All right. All right. So, all right. Slow down. Hey, come back here. Coming back now. Coming back. Sit down. Okay. Look at. I created a monster. From now on. Now you'll notice what happened there. You'll notice when you gave your name. When you gave your name loudly and clearly, your self-esteem just surged, and you became happy and spontaneous, and you started talking, and you're all off the wall. I mean, so from now on, for the rest of your life, notice this, is the way you give your name is an expression of how you feel about yourself. And you can increase your self-esteem just by giving your name boldly and clearly and looking the person in the eye. And when they give you their name, pounce on the name. Because when you say, "Ah, Harry Wilson," that's a great name. That's like the guy in the movie, isn't it? Or something like that. People love to have people recognize their name, and their self-esteem goes up because you make a big thing of their name. So you get a twofer in just shaking hands with people. Some people shake hands and say, "Hi, how are you? How are you? Yeah, nice to see you. How are you? What's your name?" But remember, it's almost like that you'll see a tank. There's a rule is that a tank cannot fire while it is moving, in motion. So when tanks fire, I watch History Channel, is the tank will roll in and it will stop, boom, and the cannon will go, boom, like that. And then it will start moving again. Have you seen this in the movies? The tank has to stop so that it can home in on the target. So from when you meet a person, you're the same way. When you meet a person, boom, focus in on that person and that person's name, and treat that person for those few moments as the most important person in the world, because in each person's estimation, they are. And you're recognizing that this is a really important person that you're talking to. I remember I was in Washington, and I was at this really high-level conference, and I met Peggy Noonan. Peggy Noonan writes the big column for the Wall Street Journal. She was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. She's one of the most respected women in politics and in writing. And so I met her, and I was introduced to her. Very nice-looking woman, well turned out. And she shook hands with me, and she said, "You're Brian Tracy from Solana Beach." And I said, "Well, yes, I am. Thank you." I said, "How did you know that?" It says it on your name tag. But I still remember. I mean, it really took me back. Here's this big Washington big shot. "You're Brian Tracy from Solana Beach. It's a pleasure to meet you." And I think, how did she know that? I mean, I didn't know they knew my name here in Washington. But do you think she's a popular person wherever she goes? Do you think I would love to see her again? I mean, just that one greeting really causes you to feel positive about her and positive about yourself. You walk around polishing your name tag. Yeah, Brian Tracy, Solana. So act as if you're already a positive, friendly person. The fastest way to do it is to introduce yourself and give your name loud and clear and ask for their name and repeat it back loud and clear. And you know something? I'll just say, "That's a great name." It doesn't matter what the person's name is. Say, "That's a great name." And for them, it is a great name. So what you've said is perfectly true. They believe their name is a great name. Anybody believe that their name sucks? No, we all believe our name is a great name. So, number 7, the key to raising the self-esteem of others is to make others feel important. Make others feel important. This is the most important foundation principle of psychology, is just to make other people feel important. So how do you do that? To make others feel important, first of all, eliminate destructive criticism. It's just don't criticize others, especially never criticize a person directly or indirectly. And remember this, there is a fact, there are several speeds. You know, there's a second, there's a minute, there's a second, there's a millisecond, which is a thousandth of a second, and there's a nanosecond, which is a millionth of a second in terms of time. Well, the time that it takes, there's one period of time that's shorter than that, and it's the time that it takes something that you say to get back to the worst possible person you could have ever said it about. So you can say a critical thing right here in this meeting, over there in the corner where you're talking to someone, and somebody you know in New Jersey who you are criticizing will know it within instants. Somehow it gets back to them. It seems to percolate through the internet, or somebody phones, or somebody mentions it. So never say anything about other people that is negative that you don't want them to hear about. You can say, you know, this person has strengths and weaknesses, but it's better, as Frank Sinatra said, if you can't say something nice, don't speak at all, is my advice. And so eliminate destructive criticism of any kind. Just don't criticize. Second of all, be agreeable. Don't argue. Even if people say preposterous things, just agree. Say, well, that's an interesting point of view. And even if you disagree with it completely, it's not worth arguing. There's a little ditty that says, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." And so therefore, a man convinced against his will, or a woman convinced against her will, is of the same opinion still. She's not going to change her opinion. That's her decision. So don't argue with it. Say, well, that's an interesting point of view. Interesting is a really great cover-all word for everything and nothing. That's interesting. What does interesting mean? Never mind. So try first to understand the other person's point of view. Or you can say, that's an interesting point of view. Why do you say that? Why do you say that? I learned this many, many years ago. It's one of the most powerful of all questions to try to pursue an argument if you don't necessarily agree. Say, why do you say that? And listen to why they say it. And sometimes, remember, there's a lot of things we know that aren't true. Sometimes they say, the reason I say that is because of recent surveys, and it turns out that they are correct, that your old idea is not correct. And when you say, why do you say that? It's not an argumentative word. It's curious to know where they got that opinion. So if you disagree with a person, say, why do you say that? And have them tell you where they get it from. A lot of people have no idea. They heard it in a horoscope, or they saw it in a television show or something. One of the most important principles in the development of the human personality is the principle of non-resistance. Again, this is considered one of the great spiritual principles, is that, what is it they say in the Bible? That if a man asks you to go with him a mile, go with him 70 times 7 miles, and so on. Is non-resistance means that the passivity is sort of like what Gandhi taught, non-resistance, is instead of resisting problems in the world, just be completely passive. Don't get angry if other people are angry. Don't get upset if other people are upset. Just stay calm. So non-resistance is very, very powerful. Gandhi brought down the British Empire in India with the policy of non-resistance. Just says, we're just not going to fight. We're not going to argue. And they just had no way of countering an enemy that would not fight back. You know what he had his people do? He had them just sit down. Just sit down on the railway tracks, sit down in the streets, just sit down and don't move. Don't work, don't produce anything, don't work. And they finally had to just pack it up. How can you manage 500 million people who just sit there? They won't argue with you. They went home. Damn. So non-resistance is very powerful. So acceptance is another wonderful way to make other people feel important. One of the things that everybody has is a deep down need to be accepted by others, accepted especially by the most important people. One of the major reasons for unhappiness in our society is people feel rejected. They feel that they're not accepted. And how do you accept people? It's just a smile. Just a smile when you meet new people. Smile at them, and what it does is it tells them that I see you as attractive, as pleasant to look at, as friendly, as a good person. Just smile at people. And they say an insincere smile is better than a sincere frown. And just smile genuinely when you meet people. When you smile at people, when you meet them, their self-esteem goes up, and your self-esteem goes up as well. Appreciation is another powerful way to make people feel important. And how do you express appreciation? You simply say, thank you, on a regular basis. Say thank you to everybody for everything they do. Say thank you for small things and thank you for large things. Say thank you for things that you want people to repeat. When I sit in a restaurant, I will probably say thank you to the waiter 5 times before we get the first drink or the first serving. Why? It's because once you've thanked a waiter 3 or 4 or 5 times, thank you for the water, thank you for the menus, thank you for the recommendation, thank you for being so quick, thank you. By the time you said thank you 4 or 5 times, that waiter feels so important and so happy about themselves, they hover over you like butterflies for the whole time. And it's just the most amazing thing. And just say thank you. Say thank you to your parents, and thank you to your children, thank you to your spouse, say thank you to your staff, say thank you all the time. What does it hurt? And every time you say thank you, their self-esteem goes up because they feel more important, and your self-esteem goes up. There's a wonderful line from Shakespeare that says, the fragrance of the rose lingers on the hand that casts it. Of course, the fragrance of whatever you cast lingers on your hand. So be careful what you throw around. People don't realize that's what happens. So now, the most powerful, successful men and women tend to be gracious and courteous, as the example that I just told you. I have worked now with probably 3 or 4 billionaires, some of the richest people in the world, and spent many hours with them. Sometimes a few hours, sometimes many hours, sometimes even, in one case, 3 full days of intensive strategic planning with one of the richest men in the world at my right hand in the strategic planning session. Without exception, these people have been gracious. They've been very nice people. They've got nothing to prove. They're very easygoing. They're very polite. They're very interested in you. If you didn't know from having read the Forbes 400 list how rich this person was, you wouldn't know it. You'd think this person is a very nice, successful executive. It's only when you do the background work that you find this is one of the richest people in the world. And we meet them, Barbara and I meet them on a regular basis, and without exception, they're just very nice people. You know, so people say, well, I'd rather be rich. I'd rather be happy than be rich. Well, I've got news for you. The rich are very happy. Don't you forget it. So admiration is another wonderful way to build self-esteem in others and to make people feel important. Admiration means admiring the traits of another person or admiring the possessions of another person. Admiring a man's tie, admiring a woman's hairdo, admiring a man's shoes, admiring a woman's dress or clothing or any of her accessories. Admiring anything about the person of another person raises their self-esteem, makes them feel more important, makes them like themselves more, and makes them like you more as well. So it's very powerful. You go into a person's house, admire the home, admire the living room, admire the view, admire the furniture. Just say, that's a beautiful view, or this is a lovely living room, or that's a beautiful piece of furniture. Admiring things, remember this, when people buy things for themselves, their lives, their offices, they invest emotion in them. Things may not have emotion of themselves, but the person has invested emotion in choosing that item. When people get dressed, they give a lot of thought to what they're going to wear, so how they'll be seen by other people. And when you compliment them on it, they feel happy because you've complimented them on something that's important to them. For women, is far more important than for men. But even for men are suckers for two things: admire their ties and admire their shoes. Women have all kinds of clothes and hundreds of pairs of shoes, but men have a few pairs of shoes, and they wear them till they fall off. And when you admire a man's shoes, they'll say, I said, well, that's a beautiful pair of shoes. Really? You like that? Yeah, well, where did you get them? Oh, I got them from Edmunds. And they'll start to tell you. And I was walking down the street once, and I saw that shoe store, and I went in there, and I tried on. They'll tell you more about those shoes than you ever cared to know. Or, that's a beautiful tie. Where did you get that tie? It's amazing how people will just stop. You can be talking with a man, arguing with a man, and you say, by the way, that's a very nice tie. And he'll just go a complete pattern interrupt. He'll forget what he was saying, and you'll own him. I mean, you'll own him because he'll say, oh, really? You like that tie? That's a beautiful tie. I'd love to have one of those for my father, uncle, husband, son, something else. Where did you get it? And just like it's just a sidebar from the argument, and just keep asking about the tie, and the argument will disappear. Men are such suckers, you know. As Abraham Lincoln said, everybody likes a compliment. Everybody likes a compliment. And so just go out of your way to find things that you like and compliment them on it. And they may not say anything on the outside, but people always feel happy, and their self-esteem goes up. And whenever you compliment someone else, the fragrance of the rose stays with you as well. Number 6 is praise and approval. Praise and approval are some of the most powerful ways of making people feel important in the whole world. Napoleon once made this comment, and Napoleon would recruit huge armies and take them into massive 10, 20, 50, 100,000 person battles where people would fight gloriously, and sometimes there'd be thousands killed in the battles. And so it was a terrible experience. He said, but I found a most remarkable thing. He said, men will die for ribbons. If they have a chance of winning a ribbon for valor, they will die for a chance to win a ribbon that other people will see that they earned this ribbon as a result of bravery in combat. So people will do extraordinary things for praise and approval. And so we say one of the definitions of self-esteem is the degree to which individuals consider themselves to be praiseworthy. If a person does not consider themselves to be praiseworthy, they feel devalued. They feel they're not really worth very much. When a person feels that they are praiseworthy, that other people praise them, or I was talking to someone else the other day, and he said this really wonderful thing about you. People go, ooh, really? What did he say? Do you remember it word for word? Say it a few times. People love to hear that they've been praised by others. So it's a very powerful thing that you can do is when you meet someone who knows someone and you respect the person they know, say, he or she is a really great person. He or she does wonderful work. Or he or she, just say something positive, and by the speed of summer lightning, it'll get back to that person. And they say, you know, I spoke to someone else the other day, and this is what they said about you. When you're speaking to people, give them praise and approval for everything they do. When we were raising our kids and they cleaned up their bedrooms, rarely, we would always praise them for cleaning up their bedrooms, how clean it was, how neat it was, how orderly it was, and how smart you must be if you can have a bedroom as clean as this. And you know what? Over time, their bedrooms were cleaned up all the time. They just remembered that they got a positive feeling just about cleaning up their bedroom because they remembered how good they felt when it was acknowledged. So we say praise, keys to giving praise are praise immediately. Be immediate with your praise. Don't wait to praise somebody a month afterwards. Praise them immediately. Even if you give them a phone call and leave a message or send them an email, as soon as you hear that they've done something well or that you experience it, immediately praise them. Say, that's great. That's a good job. That looks really great. Thank you very much. And second of all, be specific. Say, this letter is beautifully typed, or this proposal is beautifully put together, or try to be specific about what you're praising. As opposed to, you're a great guy, or you're a great person, which is really general. Be specific. You really did that especially well. People love specific praise, and be public with your praise. If you want to double, triple, increase the power of praise on a person, praise them in public. In fact, there's a recommendation in of one of the Chinese philosophers talking to leaders. He said, take control of the virtual presences. Take control of the virtual presences. And it goes on to explain the virtual presences are the things that you can do publicly to make people feel important. Is you can actually bring people up and praise them in front of everyone else. So I taught this to a friend of mine who now in every single meeting, he will have a little praise card where he will say, before we begin, I'd like to have Neil stand up. And I want to tell you something that Neil did last week or has done over the last month. And he will actually praise him very specifically and clearly for something they've done. And I'd like to have a hand of applause for Neil, and have everybody applause. And everybody applauds Neil. Now, Neil will remember that for 25 years. And you think Neil will be a better employee and do better work and be more motivated? Not only that, everybody who's applauding will do better work as well, because they see that really good work gets appreciated by the top people and by everybody in the company. That's why top companies have award ceremonies. And in the award ceremony, they bring up before they bring up the person, the senior person, as high as they can get, reads the award and what wonderful things this person has done and brings them onto the stage for this fabulous hand of applause by everybody. And that person walks off and they're ready to climb trees and tackle lions. They're ready to go out there and do 10 times as much as they've done because they've got the praise in front of others. So praising in front of others is very, very powerful. Now, number 7 is attention. Another way to develop a healthy personality for yourself by making other people feel important. Attention means listening. And listening is the greatest of all skills. If you want to tell a person that you value them, pay close attention to them. What we find, as I said earlier, that life is the study of attention. What that means is you always pay attention to what you most value. And when you pay attention to a person very intently, you cause their self-esteem to go up. You actually cause a person's galvanic skin response to increase, their heart rate goes up, and their blood rate goes up. Their blood pressure goes up when you listen to them really intently when they talk, because they feel more and more valuable. They like themselves. They feel happier inside just by the act of listening. So one of the most powerful of all ways of interacting with others is to listen intently to them when they talk. Lean forward, face them squarely, here are the 3 keys. Number 1, listen attentively. Listen with no interruptions. Make no attempt to interrupt. Like I say, most people, this is a wonderful one-liner from a New York businesswoman. She said, most listening is just waiting. In other words, people are not listening at all. They're just waiting for their opening so they can talk. So the words are just going over their head. They're just waiting. When will this person take a breath so I can get in with my great thoughts? Really good listening is where you listen with no attempt or desire to speak. And the person realizes that you're not rushing them. Most people have what I call the cockroach in the mouth method of listening. You can see that the person just trying to get something out. If you just take a breath, they will jump in, and they're not listening at all. So what you do is you just listen attentively and don't interrupt. Listening without interruption, listening intently, is one of the most powerful techniques that exists for raising people's self-esteem and for causing them to like you and respect you. Number 2 is pause before replying. When a person finishes speaking, just allow a silence in the air, as though you're really thinking carefully about what they said. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be 2 or 3 or 5 seconds. Sometimes it'll be 30 seconds. But usually 3 to 5 seconds is enough to make it clear that you're now thinking about what the person said, which means that that person is valuable and important, because what they said is important, and you're carefully considering it. Here's another advantage, is when you allow a silence, the words actually soak in to a deeper level of mind, and you understand what they're saying better. So sometimes when Barbara and I are speaking, she'll say something, and I'll just stop, and then I'll actually hear what she was saying, what she actually meant. If you immediately speak after a person stops, often you don't get what they said. They said, no, they'll say, no, that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant. Have you had that experience? Because you weren't listening to what they were really saying. But if you allow silence after a statement, it seems to soak in. Like water soaks into a garden. When you water a garden, the thoughts soak deeper into your brain. You understand at a deeper level. And 3 is question for clarification. Question for clarification. And the best question I've ever found, and it works in every single language, is the question, how do you mean? How do you mean exactly? Remember, the person who asks questions has control. And when you ask, how do you mean, the person you're talking to will expand on what they just said. And the rule is, if you are ever in doubt about what the person really meant, then assume that you didn't understand and ask, how do you mean? And then if they say it again and you don't understand, then you say, how do you mean exactly? And you can ask the question, how do you mean, several times in a conversation, and the person will always expand on what they just said. And so you fully understand what they really did mean by what they were saying before you reply. Always make sure you're clear before you reply. Now, number 9, in developing a healthy personality, remember the boomerang. The boomerang says that any genuine emotion expressed by you toward another person will boomerang back on you. It will boomerang back in exactly the same intensity. What do they call a boomerang that doesn't come back? A stick, you're right. But this boomerang principle is very powerful because anything you send out comes back by the law of sowing and reaping. Here's the other person, and here's any genuine emotion that you express toward them comes back to you. And so if it's a negative emotion, it'll come back to you as well. It'll cause anger and rancor and frustration and so on. Number 2, the boomerang also relates to the laws of sowing and reaping. Whatsoever a man soweth, that also shall he reap, but especially in relationships. Cause and effect. The cause is what you say. The effect is the response you get. The law of attraction, what you say, triggers and attracts people and circumstances back to you. And the law of correspondence. Your outer world will correspond to your inner world, as we've talked about before. So therefore, when you think of other people, send out positive thoughts. And if you send out positive thoughts, even to people that you're a little bit mad at for whatever reason, you send out positive thoughts, they actually neutralize any negativity that you're thinking toward them. And very often, thinking positive thoughts here about a person at a distance will cause that person to change while you're sitting here. And the next time you communicate with them or they'll communicate with you, they'll be different people. They'll be completely changed. They'll not be the people that you were mad at before. They will have gone through some kind of change and they won't even know what it was. It was your thought energy conflicted with their thought energy and neutralized the negative emotion. You know that in mathematics, if you combine a positive number with a negative number, if they're equal numbers, they neutralize, they cancel each other out. A positive thought from you can cancel out a negative thought or even a negative feeling in the mind of someone else. So the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There's probably never been a better rule than this. But Aaron, do you remember, his name is Phil, but do you remember Aaron from 24, the guy who plays the security guard at the White House? Does anybody remember him? Nice, round guy. I had lunch with him for about 2 hours on Tuesday. He's a genuinely nice guy. But he said, and he's a speaker, and he came up with this insight, which I thought was very good. And please, I hope I haven't told you this before. But what he said was, he's changed the golden rule for the first time. And I thought he was going to give me the platinum rule, you know, do unto others as they would have you do unto them, Tony's idea. He said no. He said, here's what I think the golden rule should be, because sometimes when you treat other people well, they'll treat you poorly. They'll treat you badly. They'll take advantage of you. This does happen. So you don't want to do unto others what they would do unto you. He said, do unto others as you would have life do unto you. And I thought, that is a damn good improvement. Do unto others, treat all other people the way you would like life to treat you in general. Because you can never be sure how that person will treat you in response to a kindness. But if you say, I'm going to treat this person kindly and courteously, irrespective of them, because that's the way I want life to come back to me. And by the law of sowing and reaping, if you treat other people the way you would like life to treat you, then it will come back to you. Like the boomerang, like the law of attraction. It'll come back to you in the most positive